As developers, we can each have our own specific preferences on how we like to format our code, and we can have very strong feelings about those preferences. Now, this is fine if you're just a solo developer and you don't have to worry about what other people think about your code, but if you're working as part of a team, it can be a bit of a problem. And in this situation, it's almost a guarantee that each team member is going to have a vastly different view on how the code should be formatted. So by picking a coding standard and sticking to it, you can prevent all kinds of anger and annoyance. But once you've picked out a standard, you're going to have to enforce it some way. And you can use a tool like PHP Code Sniffer, which should be set up to run automatically whenever we push our code to our source code repository. The downside to this is that we generally have to wait to get a report back telling us what the problems are, and then we have to take time out of our busy day to fix it. But what if we could have GitHub Actions just automatically resolve as many of the problems as possible? In this video, we're going to do just that. Hello developers, and welcome to the PHP Architect channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Scott Keck-Warren, and on this channel we discuss a wide variety of topics related to the PHP ecosystem. Make sure you subscribe so you can get our latest videos when they're published. For our example today, we're going to create a project hosted on GitHub that has a GitHub Action set up to automatically validate our code against the PSR12 coding standard, and we're going to use PHP Code Sniffer to do this. If you haven't had a chance yet to use PHP Code Sniffer, it's a library that provides us with two command line tools to perform validation and beautification of our code. The first one we're going to discuss is the PHP Code Sniffer, which allows us to validate our code against a coding standard and then show how we can fix it to meet the standard. To start, I'm going to create a new directory and then use Composer to install PHP Code Sniffer. Then I'm going to create a file that's formatted in a way that violates the PSR12 coding standard. Oh. Now I can run PHP Code Sniffer on this file and specify the PSR12 coding standard, and we'll see some errors. The X's specify that we can fix these violations automatically, but we want to see these errors in GitHub, so we're not going to fix them right now. Now we can set up our directory to be a Git repository, add our files, and then push them to our GitHub repository that we've already created. Now we need to set up a GitHub action to automatically run PHP Code Sniffer when we push our code to the repository. To do this, we're going to create a new file named GitHub Workflows PHPCS.yaml and fill it with the following. This is a very basic GitHub Actions YAML file. I'm not going to go through all the steps right now, but if you're curious about each step, you can learn more in our video automating our tests with GitHub Actions. Now we'll commit this file and push it to GitHub. If we look at the Actions tab of our project, we'll see that our action ran but failed because our file fails as we kind of expect it to. We'll have a fix for this after this word from our sponsors. Do you want higher clarity in production but don't have the time to earn your degree in observability? Me too. Forget logs, metrics, and traces. Honeybadger Insights is built around structured events. When you send your application logs and other events to Honeybadger, you'll unlock the power of Honeybadger's powerful new querying language, BadgerQL. You can then use BadgerQL to ask any question about your data, convert any event into a metric, and chart your metrics on a custom dashboard. You can do all of this on Honeybadger's free plan as part of their comprehensive monitoring suite, which includes error tracking, uptime monitoring, status pages, and more. Speaking of error tracking, did you know that an error is really just a first-class event in Honeybadger? In fact, you can use Insights and BadgerQL to explore all of your existing Honeybadger data in new ways. It's pretty cool. Give it a try today at honeybadger.io. That's honeybadger.io. Now, to fix our code, PHP Code Sniffer comes with a second command line tool called the PHP Code Beautification and Fixer tool. We can run the PHP Code Beautification and Fixer tool to fix any of the errors that we found using PHP Code Sniffer that had the X in them, which tends to be a lot of them. We can run it locally by running vendor bin PHPCBF with the standard name and then the file path that we want to run it on. And then we can commit the results and our PHP check will pass. But I don't want to have to run this manually. I want to continue to automate all the things. So I'm going to instead use GitHub Actions to automatically run PHP Code Beautification and Fixer and then commit those results directly into our repository. To do this, we'll create a new YAML file called GitHub Workflows PHPCBF.yaml. This file is going to be extremely similar to the phpcs.yaml file we created earlier, but with a couple of important differences. The first is that we have a section that sets the permissions to allow the action to perform a write into the repository. The next is that we have a step that runs PHP Code Beautification and Fixer, and then we specify that the GitHub action should always continue. This is because if PHP Code Beautification and Fixer fixes anything, it'll return an error code and the action will just stop and it won't continue to actually commit the changes. And then finally, we're going to use the git auto commit action to create a new commit onto our branch. Now we'll just add this file to our repository and then commit the results. Now we can go back to our Actions tab and see we have 2 actions that are running and not just one. After our new action finishes, we can look at the commit history of our code and see that our code has actually been fixed. Now, the annoying thing is that the PHP Code Sniffer run that we created is going to fail because it runs using the initial commit and not the newly created commit on the branch. And GitHub Actions doesn't automatically rerun our actions after we've automatically created something. I think this is to prevent an infinite loop, but it is annoying. When this happens, we just need to pull down the changes that we created in that new commit and then push them back up to GitHub so our PHP CS action will run correctly. Now, my team has a rule that all changes that go into the main branch need to go through a pull request so that the change can be validated. So we don't want any code being changed in the main branch automatically because it could just break everything and we wouldn't know. To fix this, we can specify that the action only runs on a pull request and not on every push. We all have other actions that we run only when some files change. For example, we use GitHub Actions to compile the CSS and JavaScript for our application, but that only needs to happen when we make changes to specific directories. We can use the path option to specify this. A brief recap, your team needs a coding standard. You should be using PHP Code Sniffer to enforce that standard, and you should use GitHub Actions to apply that standard automatically. I hope you enjoyed our video. If so, make sure you subscribe, comment, share, and like, as it does help others find us. Have you started using GitHub Actions to help make your code a little more manageable? Let me know in the comment section below, or send me a message at ScottKeckWarren on phpc.social. I'd love to hear how I've helped you, and it's always great to hear from a fan. This is Scott Keck-Warren for the PHP Architect channel, signing off and reminding you to keep watching, keep coding, and keep reading.